Guys, I'm absolutely delighted to bring in somebody that I hold in very high regard, that has been a great source of inspiration, everything in my advocacy journey. Welcome in AMR patient survivor, executive director of the AMR narrative, chair of the WHO Taskforce of AMR survivors, which I can't wait to talk about more. Vanessa Carter, welcome in.
Thank you so much, Joel. Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited because I always follow your show. So yeah, it's really, really good to be here with you.
Oh, that's awesome. It's always nice to know somebody out there is watching and listening. So thank you. So for anyone, we'll get into all the advocacy side of things and your journey with your health and everything. But for anyone that's not come across you before, do you want to give us like a real sort of like high overview of who you are, where you're from, maybe a little bit about, there's a particular accent there we're picking up on, and then we'll go from there.
Yeah, sure. So you gave me quite a good introduction. I'm a patient advocate. My accent is South African. A lot of people sometimes think it's Australian, but it's actually South African. And I lived in Johannesburg all my life, and I moved to the UK in 2020. So I've been living here for 3.5 years. And and as you said, I'm executive director of the AMR narrative and chair of the Taskforce, WHO Taskforce of AMR survivors. So my background is I had a very, very serious car accident in Johannesburg in 2004. And so basically what happened was a car overtook us on the wrong side of the road, and the driver of the car sort of swerved so that we didn't have a collision. But what happened was the front wheel of the car caught on the pavement, and the car went into like a really violent spin and ended up into a concrete wall. So I was in the passenger seat in the front, and I hit the dashboard with, like a really high force, and I broke almost every bone on the right side of my face. So I had a broken jaw, broken nose, smashed all these bones on the right side. I lost my right eye. And then I also had from the seatbelt, because I actually was wearing a seatbelt, but because I was leaning forward at the time, I got a lot of stomach damage. So I perforated my bowel. I broke my pelvic bone, and I got severe back injuries, lower back, and then I also got to the upper neck area. I got some severe injuries as well. And then from there, I was taken to in South Africa called the Charlotte Maxeke Johannesburg Academic Hospital. Put onto life support. I was resuscitated as well on the side of the road. And it was a month, kind of getting through those different injuries, which, I was given like a 30% chance of survival. But, miraculously, I got through it. And it was also a public hospital in Johannesburg, which was kind of also understaffed and so on. So it was really miraculous that I was able to do that. And then, even though I had all these injuries, the facial reconstruction that I needed to happen was the most complicated. So after I recovered, learning to walk again, learning to drive again, getting used to work again, and so on, I started to look for different types of doctors that could reconstruct my face. Right. So in other words, I needed an ENT surgeon, ear, nose and throat surgeon, neurologist, for the brain injury that I had. I needed a plastic surgeon, maxillofacial surgeon, and so on. So they started to implant different types of prosthetics to fix the face. And so all kind of went well, except to my 6th year, when I had my 4th prosthetic implanted. We had this done. It seemed like a regular surgery. I went out shopping one day. I went to my car. I felt moisture on my face. And when I pulled down my mirror in my car, my rear view mirror, there was pus coming out of my face. Mm-hmm. And I was kind of like, what is this? I've never seen this before. So I phoned my plastic surgery officers, and they said, come in, this looks like an infection. And so it was. I got admitted to hospital. They had to do what they call a debridement on the prosthetic. A debridement means a cleaning of the prosthetic.
Right.
They also had to do some reconstructive surgery to fix the tissue that had been eaten away by this infection. And so, yeah, we did that. I got discharged, but 2 weeks later, the infection came back again, but this time worse. So we did the same sort of procedure. And I don't want to use like very scientific words. The second procedure was what they called a cheek rotation flap. What that basically meant was trying to take skin from the cheek to try and, repair this damaged tissue. And they debrided it, they cleaned it again. 2 weeks later, the infection was back again. And then I went to go see the NT surgeon because plastic surgeon said maybe, your sinuses were completely destroyed in this car accident. Maybe if we clear the sinuses, it'll be okay. But so we did a sinus drainage surgery, but 2 weeks later the infection came back again. And this kind of went on and on and on for 11 months. Until eventually they had to take the prosthetic out in an emergency surgery. And so I remember my ENT surgeon sitting at the bottom of the bed going, actually, your plastic surgeon had to take this out because he was worried about it. He was worried about this infection. And that moment for me was like the light bulb moment, like the alarm bells going off, where I suddenly he said they'd sent it off for testing. And I said, why is this infection so special?
Yeah.
What is happening? Because, I think as patients, sometimes we think infections are just infections. We don't realize they're different types of infections. So I called the pathology officers and I said, please send me a copy of my test results. And what got sent back to me was at the top of the test, it said MRSA. And there were a whole lot of R's and S's running down the right side of the test. And on the left side of the test was a whole lot of different types of antibiotics that the R meant I was either resistant to, and the S meant I was susceptible to, meaning it either worked or it didn't. And so, as patients, we get online, we get on Google, we start Googling. That's what I did. And up came this term, antibiotic resistance, which I never heard of before. So, so I went back to my plastic surgeon and I said, please, can you explain this test? Please, can you tell me what I can do better as a patient? Because, of course, now my whole face was infected. And, luckily, once they'd taken out the prosthetic, it kind of relieved the pressure on, the infection getting worse. But I still had it. So he put me on like a last resort antibiotic called vancomycin. Last resort meaning that it was one of the newly discovered kind of antibiotics. And I was told that I couldn't do any more surgery for another year. And at this point in time, I had sort of a huge hole in my face, all the bacteria had eaten away the bottom lower eyelid. So I gave it a year. And during that year, I kind of got online again and I said, in South Africa, we have a shortage of certain surgeons. One of them is a craniofacial surgeon. And a craniofacial surgeon basically works on both the skin and bone. So I started I put all my sort of photos into a Word document with sort of a very short description of what had happened to me. So this was like 4 pages of that. And I sent it off to the USA and the UK and everywhere. And I was very lucky that I got a reply back from a USA doctor that was working in the face transplant surgery division at Brigham and Women's Hospital in the USA. He gave me advice and he said, as few surgeries as possible, this is what you need to be doing. And what we needed to be doing was not putting foreign objects in. So no prosthetics, try and use a leftover bone. And yeah, so we did that surgery. I found a doctor in Johannesburg who mimicked that. And lo and behold, like a bad case of deja vu, I got the infection back again, but this time not just in the skin, also in the bone.
Oh, wow.
And then the treating doctor that I was with started to rotate different types of antibiotics. And then eventually 3 to 4 months later, the infection finally cleared. So this was like a 10-year journey from the time that I had my accident to the 3-year journey of battling infections, resistant infections, to finally, looking okay. Looking to a point where people say, wow, I wouldn't even tell that you almost lost your face. So that's kind of a bit of a background on what happened to me as a patient.
the context of that as yet, and I know I'm probably going to echo what you heard a million times, but you look incredible. Knowing all of that you went through, it's just, and I don't know, I already had so much respect for you, Vanessa, from just watching your advocacy, and we'll get on to all of that shortly. But knowing where you've come from, just to be with us here and sharing all that, I really appreciate it, because I will talk about maybe some of the sort of adaptations and the journey you went on, sort of getting through all of that from the sort of physical side. But I've got lots of points I wanted to bring back to you, so I just didn't want to interrupt you because it was so powerful. I just wanted to listen. So if you don't mind, I'm just going to jump back to a few points. Lucky felt the wrong word, but when you were telling that story about that accident, like it feels wrong to say how incredibly lucky of everything you've gone through since, but because the injuries you sustained were horrendous, and that must have come with so much more rehabilitation than just what was going on with your face and the AMR side of things.
Yeah, I mean, it did. Like I said to you, like I had perforated my small intestines, my bowel area and so on.
Mm-hmm.
So, there was also a time when I was sitting in hospital with an adhesive bowel obstruction, and I thought I was going to die again. I've had a couple of times when I thought, this is the time, this is now, this is what's going to happen. So, and as I say, like learning to walk again, that's exactly what it was learning to walk again with a fractured pelvis, being told that at the age of 40, I'd probably need a total hip replacement. These kind of things that come from doctors that you get told. And of course, I'm partially blind. I live every day partially blind. But to be honest, maybe also, and I hear a lot of patient stories all the time. That's why I say, I use the word lucky, because this happened to me. I was very lucky to get through it.
Yeah.
But there's so much more worse that happens to others. And this is why also I think me being a patient advocate is that choice that I made to help others, because I'm in that position to do so with my lived experience. So
it's very commendable, and like I say, you're marvelous at doing it. And thank you for going back over that. I just want to highlight that, because I was thinking in my head, we're not on the show, but people I've spoken to that have had that sort of damage to their pelvis, and how life changing that is. Then there's the sight loss, and I'm just thinking there's all these layers. And obviously we're here we'll now talk about the AMR side of things in depth. I just wanted to highlight, them other areas of that sort of journey you would have probably had to really fight through, which would have been life-changing for people on their own, let alone all the other things you were dealing with. So says a lot about your character. And there was one other point I just want to go back to, is that when you were talking about finding doctors, it suddenly struck me, how much burden was there on you? Because this wasn't like you go into A&E and you come out fixed a couple of weeks later. Like, what was the burden on you in terms of your aftercare and working through all the AMR discovery side of things?
It's a funny thing, because now I've lived in both countries, right? I've lived in South Africa and the UK. South Africa have both a public health and very strong private healthcare sector. So, it's much more affordable to go for private health in South Africa if you're kind of middle class, and so on. So I think that it was easier for me in a country like South Africa to choose my doctors, because I had private medical care. So when I first started out, I was in the public health system, and then I moved to private care. In England, I think it's a lot harder, because the NHS doesn't always allow you to choose that doctor. There's a lot of referrals to finally get to the right person that you need. I feel like it did make a huge difference. And to be honest with you, I didn't always go with, I tried to find, and I don't even know how they could rate this, the best doctor, because my team of medical professionals was not just made up of people that had a lot of publications, or they were known for their successful surgeries and so on. Some of them were made up of doctors that had a good bedside manner. And they really, my plastic surgeon, I would go in any time I wanted to, and he would be so caring. He kind of just he made me feel like he actually cared. And for me, that was how I put my team together. But as I say, in England, it's very different.
Yeah, and that bedside manner, I'm just assuming here, so I'll leave it for you to answer. But with something as personal and sensitive as a facial injury and what you went through, that must count for a lot, because the mental health side of things must have been. Yeah, I can't say I can't imagine. But do you want to maybe tell us a little bit about that side of things?
Yeah, and it still is. I'll be honest with you, Joel. Like the type of work I do now is very camera intense, very, and I still have that stigma. It's that stigma of the facial difference. For example, where somebody does a video of me and they film the wrong side, and I'm like,
Yeah.
I'll be honest, I don't like it. But at the end of the day, again, it goes back to, what are we doing this work for? Who are we doing this work for? And and I've kind of learned to get past that, if that makes sense. And at the end of the day, you know what? Nobody's perfect. Everybody's different. So it doesn't matter about what I look like, or, you see me like face up now, I got my bad side. I've got some videos that don't look great, but, this is what we do for a living. So.
And I say it often, but it's amazing as well what advocacy can drive you to do and overcome, because I know I was on two very different paths 5 years ago, where I could have gone down the very dark one, or I could have found advocacy. And the things, well, sitting here talking to you today, I never had any hopes, dreams, aspirations of doing this sort of thing every single Sunday. It terrifies me, but we find a way through it. So, we'll talk about the advocacy shortly. But I suppose what I wanted to touch upon, and we'll deep dive into what antimicrobial resistance means for the future and everything else. But in terms of like, what does day-to-day management, or, in the short and medium term, what does that look like for you at the moment?
So, at the moment, because I've got lots of prosthetics in my face, I'm always worried about infections. And actually, I do sometimes get recurring infections. They're not necessarily resistant infections. But there is that panic, so for example, even on the left-hand side, the good eye, I sometimes get like infections, and and then I have to kind of ask my partner to help me with doing things, because this is my good eye, so I'm blind, I can't see what's going on. So I'm very, very vigilant with things, and I'm vigilant, for example, with washing my hands literally every 30 minutes.
Yeah.
Anything that I touch that might, so for example, when I'm cooking food, if I touch raw chicken, I go and I wash my hands with, the normal 30 seconds, singing happy birthday twice kind of thing before I even touch myself or anything else in the kitchen. Because of germs and bacteria, for example, even like keeping the bathroom clean, keeping a sponge clean, not sharing towels with somebody else in your family. These are all things that can pass germs between each other. So I'm very vigilant with that, because if that towel ends up on this side of the face and there are 3 or 4 prosthetics inside, the problem is when you get an infection in one prosthetic, it can pass between all of them, and that could end up into bloodstream infections, sepsis, and so on.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Sorry, excuse my ignorance. With all of that resistance, what does treatment look like for you? We'll talk about the bigger picture of AMR shortly, but what does it look like for you personally in terms of when you do get an infection?
Right now, if I do get an infection, I talk carefully about it with my doctor first. I don't just jump on to say, hey, I need an antibiotic. Mm-hmm. I'll have a very, very close conversation with my doctor. If we go back in time, when I did actually have the resistant infections, and when I had to take my antibiotics, and I always do this even now, if you take an antibiotic, take it exactly as prescribed.
Yeah.
People don't always realize that these are very, very special medications. We can go buy painkillers, for example, at Tesco's, right, and say, yeah, there's a paracetamol. Well, if I take it, it says don't take more than maybe 4 a day or something like that. Well, if I take it at 10 in the morning and take it at 2 or take it at 4, whatever, it's okay. But with an antibiotic, it's very, very important that we take it exactly as prescribed. And so in my case, I'll give you an example. When I had the resistant infection, I was taught to set my alarm clock. If I started to take a certain antibiotic at 5 a.m. in the morning, I needed, or 5 o'clock at night, sorry, and it needed to be twice a day. So in other words, every 12 hours, I needed to set my alarm for 5 a.m. in the morning to take the next one. And I was explained that very carefully. So basically, I wasn't treating my body, I was treating the bacteria in my body. Yeah. And if I took the antibiotic too early, so let's say like 3 hours early or 4 hours early, there was a potential risk that I was kind of like putting too many antibiotics in my body, and the bacteria would have an opportunity to mutate. Mm-hmm. So if you think of like evolution, you're like pumping yourself with these certain antibiotics. If it's not taken at a certain time, they're overexposed, and then they have a chance to adapt and survive. So absolutely, yeah. So listen to your doctor's advice. But as I say, like for me in a specific case, it was taking it at a certain time. It was also, in addition, washing my hands every few minutes. In fact, anytime. If I was out in the street, pushing a button on a traffic light, I wouldn't touch my face before I washed my hands. Mm-hmm. And also, there are different types of infections. So, not all infections are caused by bacteria. And we've learned this by COVID. COVID is a virus, right? At the moment, they've just declared Mpox, which is a virus, an infection that you can get. So this goes back to kind of like my whole thing where I said, I didn't realize that you get different types of infections. I don't want to start using scientific words, but, mine was a methicillin-resistant Staphylococcus aureus, MRSA.
I'm glad you didn't ask me to learn that in advance.
No, that was two. It was like two way over my head. So this is why communication has to be so important, because we as patients, a lot of the AMR focus has, we're talking about healthcare professionals changing behavior and so on, but we as patients are so important too, because we are the ones that go home with that antibiotic that has to take them the right way. It has to look after, wash our hands, even in hospital. It's not just up to the nurse. It's not just up to the healthcare professional. It's also up to us as patients to wash our hands and make sure that we don't spread that between other patients and to ourselves.
Yeah. And you'd like to think that the pandemic and everything, people that educated them a little bit. I'm starting to wonder how long that lasted in the memory, because as somebody that's immunosuppressed myself, like I was pretty ignorant. It's only because of my wife that she was like, you can't have antibiotics for that, it's a virus and you just got to ride it out and things like that. And then I started being more careful because I realized I was lived with a suppressed immune system and maybe probably wasn't giving it the respect it deserved. And now I can relate what you mean with the hand washing, and if my son's ill, not wanting to put him to bed at night, which sounds horrible, but you sort of find yourself a little bit fearful. So I can't imagine how much elevated that must be for yourself, knowing that all the stuff you've been through relies on avoiding those infections.
Yeah. I mean, but what the thing is, Joel, I don't want to scare anybody, because the thing is, this is life. You know what I'm saying? We are surrounded by all these different germs. We're never going to get rid of the germs. I call them germs. Some people call them microbes. In fact, our own human body is made up of more microbes than it is of human cells. Some of them are good. Some of them are really good. So, for example, if you probably know, if you eat yogurt, yogurt is fermented and it's got really good probiotics, really good bacteria in it. So, and I would still say, don't self-diagnose. Work with your doctor and ask questions. And if this is always what I say to patients as well, if an infection is not clearing, ask your doctor for a explanation why.
Mm-hmm.
And
that's true. I've never thought to ask that, because I get routine chest infections and I'm asthmatic. They can run and run and run. And there's been numerous times where I've had antibiotics break. And I must admit, I don't think I've ever asked, why does this keep coming back?
Exactly.
Don't do you? You follow orders, don't you?
Yeah. Exactly. That was one of my biggest mistakes, because when I had that resistant infection, like for the first 11 months, I didn't ask why. I just listened to instructions and I was kind of like, but if I had known about antibiotic resistance, I might have said, you know what, you don't maybe think that there's resistant there's a reason that I keep taking penicillin and it's not working. Maybe because I'm actually resistant to it. Yeah, and it was really frustrating for me. And to be honest with you, and I know you're probably one of your questions is going to be what got me to become an advocate. That was one of the reasons.
You read my mind. You read my mind. It's literally my next question. Because obviously we all find our ways here in different paths. Obviously, a lot of us normally go through a life event and everything, which is quite obvious what your one was. But what was there a spark? Was it a gradual thing? Did you just sort of find yourself feeling a need because you saw it, or was there pressure from elsewhere? I'd love to know.
Well, okay, so my background is in marketing. That was my professional background in marketing, advertising, graphic design, and so on. And so when I found out, when I was sitting with half a face, like kind of just, I said to myself, and that risk of survival, like I say, bloodstream infections and so on. I said to myself, why, as a high-risk patient, I've been through all these surgeries for 6 years, right? Why has not one doctor mentioned the word, if we do the surgery, and because you've got this recurring infection, you might have resistance? That never came up once. And that frustrated me. And then I started walking through. I was almost like a mystery patient, like a mystery shopper. I was like a mystery patient. So I started, having that marketing background, walking through hospitals, looking at where's the posters, where's the pamphlets. If I stood at the end of a pharmacy desk and I like a table where they were prescribed, they'd give the antibiotics to the patient at the end of the pharmacy table, I'd be like, well, sir, here's your antibiotics. And that was it. Like, there's no discussions taking place. And so why not? Because this is like can kill people. Do you know what I'm saying? This is something that, I think at the very least, as I said, it should be a sentence that says, so here's your antibiotics. If you don't see the infection getting better with these antibiotics, we need to advise you to go back to your doctor, because, there was a very long time where pharmaceutical packaging didn't even include a warning about resistance.
Wow.
They talked about the side effects, but they didn't talk about the potential of the bacteria or, let's just focus on antibiotics for a moment. So, the bacteria becoming resistant to the antibiotics, that was not on the pharmaceutical packaging. That is improving, but it's still not like a standard in every single country. So, so I completely advocate about that. There was one pharmaceutical company that I actually approached, and I won't mention their names. At one stage, I said to them, well, why don't you include that? And they said, well, the last time we created the insert was in 1969, and people don't read it anyway.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
I will not mention names.
Yeah. No, please don't. I don't have enough lawyers backing me.
That really made me angry. And I was
yes, I can imagine. Yeah. And the thing is, that anger, I don't know, I'm talking about my own personal experience in the advocacy work that I do, is like that anger can go two ways. It can either eat you up and change you as a person, or you can focus it. And clearly you've done the latter.
Exactly.
I'd say I would love listening to your experience of going around looking for posters, because everyone's journey is different, and that one is so novel in terms of you used the experience you already had and you're looking around, you didn't see these things, and it actually got me thinking. I have antibiotics 4 to 6 times a year because of my condition, and every time I collect them from the pharmacy, the question is, has he had these before? Because I just want to know about allergies. No one's actually said finish the course, or we've all seen it on the packaging, but nobody's ever said to me, go back to your doctor. And so you take them, you get better, you wait a couple of weeks, maybe then you get a bit worse again, you go back to doctor, they re-prescribe or try a different one, and you can absolutely see how the process has contributed to what we're facing. And I think the evidence people need to see that the real life human impact, which is why your story is so important. So how did you go from seeing the lack of information and hearing things like that from somebody in industry to actually putting into action? This was still when I was living in Johannesburg, so absolutely nothing was being done. And at that point in time, like I said, this was kind of like 2013. Okay.
So that was just after I finished my facial reconstruction. And I think having that marketing background, I said, well, you know what, I'm actually going to create a Facebook page. And so I kind of did that. And then I got onto Twitter. Back then it was called Twitter. We know it's called X now. And then they had Twitter tweet chats. And so I started interacting with a couple of tweet chats overseas. And then I built my link. So to kind of like make it easier for everybody, I tried to put myself on social media. Mm-hmm. That was the easiest way to do it. And I was very, very scared when I first started, because I thought, especially in South Africa, the health department's going to lock me down. I'm the only one that's talking.
I've definitely had that feeling of like, you start getting a little bit paranoid. How much noise do I make before it impacts me?
I'm so scared, but I just felt this like I say, I was sitting there thinking, where is it? Just that marketing background, saying, where's the communication? I think it was just that drive that said to myself, I could have died. I could have lost my face. I could have, because there was no communication. So that was my first driving force, was a lack of communication, not knowing what it was. And unfortunately, I have to be honest with you, Joel, it's still a problem today. A lot of people do not know what AMR is, antimicrobial resistance is. And then from there, I got invited to conferences that I went and spoke at, and I got invited to be part of advisory groups. I got invited to be part of medical education online courses. I got invited actually to the hospital that saved me at the time of the car accident to go and talk about my experience to their antimicrobial stewardship team. So they had already started to form this team of different doctors, and they said, we need to hear the patient experience. And so that was quite rewarding for me to go back, and speak to those people, the nurses and the amazing people from there. And so finally that ended up with, so from Joburg, then I moved to the UK. And the reason actually I moved to the UK is because my son has autism. So we had a problem with finding schools in the UK. But in my mind, I was saying, I'm working globally anyway, so it's okay. And since I've moved to the UK, I've now worked with the ministerial group in the UK as a lay member. And I also have worked in the past with the WHO Strategic Technical Advisory Group. That's a very important group as their first patient advisor. I just took a chance there, and I applied because I said patient voices need to be heard, and they accepted me. And then from there, I got accepted as the chair of the Taskforce of AMR survivors of the WHO. And what's always been in the back of my mind is this charity that needs to be established to help raise the voices of others for AMR. And that was so 2022, I established a charity called the AMR Narrative. When I finally came to the UK, we work globally. And so during my journey, there was always a shortage of patient advocates. And I've always said to myself, we need to just kind of think about how we're going to bring this diverse group of patients together, whether or not they've had AMR or whether or not they're concerned about AMR. This is, what we need to be bringing forward, not just to policymakers, but also all the other stakeholders that are working in this group, to listen to our experiences, our concerns, and so on. So quite excited about that. It's a very new charity, but, we only registered in July 2023, but yeah, really excited to get that off the ground.
Yeah, it's absolute tour de force. So again, people listening earlier in the interview would have heard me said about you being such an inspiration to people like me, and you are just like the things you've achieved and shown where as far you can take the patient voice. It really, sets a path for others. So I suppose, it's amazing what you're doing for other people with affected by AMR. It's amazing what you're doing with your charity and everything. But how does advocacy help you? And I ask this as a bit of a loaded question because I often describe it as my therapy. So I'm always interested if anyone else gets that from it, or is it how does it help you personally with managing your condition?
Yeah, I think that, personally, it is a therapeutic thing, because when these kind of things happen to us, it is very traumatic. And I guess for me, I don't see myself doing anything else. I wouldn't find any purpose if I had to go find like I say, my marketing background, I actually owned a small advertising company for 20 years. And I closed it in the end because I had such passion for patient advocacy. And I thought to myself, my advertising, my marketing needs to be channeled into that. I just get so much more reward from it. And financially, I'm surviving. It's not as financially rewarding, to be honest with you. But it's that feeling of getting up every day and saying to myself, what happened to me happened to me. But at least, when I see other patients being able to come forward and sharing their stories and so on, I feel like I'm making a difference. And that to me is my life purpose. It's that purpose that you have in life is so much more. It means so much more. And as I say, like, what is that saying? Wake up every day and love what you do, because then you will be successful. And so... Again, it's not about success for me. It's about reaching those. Last, I think it was in May, I went to go speak at the United Nations multi-stakeholder meeting. I was with the President of the General Assembly and the Deputy Secretary General of the United Nations. I had that opening segment there. And that was like a dream.
What an achievement, though.
There was a dream. And then when they wrote out the political declaration, it listed that they need to have participatory approaches to AMR, including patients, carers, and survivors. And I felt like, it doesn't matter how much I've been through to get to this point. I just feel like I'm so pleased that I've been able to contribute in that way.
Yeah. I was grinning through your entire answer there, because I'm thinking to myself, all I'm going to do is I'm going to come straight out of this room when this show finishes and say to my wife, see, somebody else gets it. Somebody else, because the words you were using about getting out of bed in the morning and finding that purpose is so powerful. And to take it as far as you have is just, it's just unbelievable. And I don't know about you, it's maybe just there's more about me, but I often find in this line of work, because the amount of burden we carry, others' stories, others' experiences, it can feel like turning the Titanic at best. Sometimes we have these achievements, these personal achievements, getting to speak to certain people or in front of certain audiences, and very quickly we haven't enjoyed the moment because we've moved on to, what's the next challenge? What's the next thing we've got to fix? So I really hope you've taken some time to appreciate how big what that was you were doing with the UN and what you've done with World Health Organization as well.
Yeah. I think it has moved quite quickly. I've been advocating now for 11 years, going on 12. So it has been a long journey. It hasn't happened overnight. It's taken a lot of persistence, but I think that's, like I say, when you're purpose driven, when you have that drive and you have that vision, and this is what I want to do. This is what I want to do in life. How I sustain it is something that I need to figure out, but it's changing things. And, like you as well, Joel, look at everything you're doing at the moment. You're going to Rwanda, aren't you? When did you go?
Yeah, I know. It hasn't really sunk in yet. Yeah, it's just amazing. Why? I don't know. But I'll, at some point, I will give myself some credit for it. But at the minute, I'm still very much in the shock phase.
Exactly. So, give yourself credit, because you do amazing work as well, and
I'm a hypocrite. I'm a massive hypocrite.
Advocacy is not for the light-hearted, but not for the faint-hearted. But same thing to you. I don't feel like I've achieved it. I still feel like I'm still going, and I've got a long further way to go.
I genuinely, just watching everything you've done, I think it's been a couple of years since we first connected now, which is crazy how quickly that's gone. And seeing how everything's just snowballing, the momentum you're getting, and even just like sitting on a platform like LinkedIn to see people talking about AMR now in my feed, people I don't follow and things like that, it really shows the impact people like yourselves have had. And I suppose, I'd like to ask maybe it's quite a big question here, but in terms of your organisation with the AMR narrative, what do you hope to achieve? And feel free to break that down in maybe short and long term, because I appreciate that's a big question.
That's fine. So we've kind of narrowed our activities down at the moment into 3 pillars. So those 3 pillars are to develop advocacy capacity. And that's a very, very big thing, because, like you've just mentioned to me that you use antibiotics on a regular basis. You are a potential patient advocate for AMR, somebody that could really make a difference. And so our organization, our charity, the types of resources that we're building at the moment could give you access to information. So, for example, one of the things we're working on is a medical directory that has different conditions listed in there, that pathogens, we call them pathogens, germs. That's a very like scientific word for people, but germs, okay. The other thing we're working on at the moment is like online courses where people can come. We've actually also just partnered with the European Patients Forum, and I was really lucky to go to Brussels like a couple of months ago and go sit with 30 young patient advocates, all with different types of long-term conditions that are so eager to like talk about this. Again, some of them might not have survived AMR, but it's not about that. It's also about talking about these concerns that we have. Look, I live on antibiotics all the time, for example, not me, but, like I say, for example, one of the patients, and they really want to start talking about their concerns around AMR, which is the right thing to do. Cancer is highly impacted, for example. Autoimmune diseases, you take antibiotics regularly. So we need to come together as a community. And so that's our third pillar. So moving beyond the advocacy capacity development is building a global community, because AMR, like COVID, can travel. So if you have a resistant type of bacteria,
I'd never considered that. I was thinking about it as being quite an individual thing. You develop resistance. I hadn't thought about how it could go person to person.
Yeah, no. So I mean, I'll just use, like I said, like for example, MRSA. If MRSA, you know how COVID was, where you had a contaminated object or surface, where you touch that surface and it could spread to the community, right? So using MRSA as an example, this is why I don't share towels, even within my own family, because if that bacteria is on there and it gets into your body and so on, you at a risk of getting that infection. So it's these bacteria, like I said, bacteria, viruses, fungi, and so on is all over the place, and it can travel. If you're on an aeroplane and it hasn't been sterilized properly or cleaned properly, then yes, you can take it. You can cross borders.
Yeah, well, yeah, no, that just not consider. I'd not consider. I felt like it was such like an individual thing, and it's just made me look at it in a very different light, and that's quite scary as well, if I'm being honest.
Yeah, exactly. I'll give you an example of that as well, Joel. Like, when I arrived in the UK, and I'll make this quick because I know we're running out of time. Okay. But when I arrived in the UK, they didn't ask me for a history. I had no medical history. But when I arrived here, I volunteered that history of having resistant infections. Yeah. And that's so important, when we cross borders, we immigrate.
It's like something that should be asked.
If I'm ever in a position where I can't speak for myself, I'm in another car accident and I'm in A&E, are they going to know what my history is with MRSA, with other resistant infections that I've had? It
feels like something that should be asked. And
definitely,
you'd like to have thought we maybe learned something from COVID, but like I say, that probably isn't moving at the pace we need it to. I was thinking whilst you were talking through that and about your pillars and everything, and also amazing for getting that down to 3, because I know so many of us in this field, we got so many problems to fix. It's really difficult to focus down. I'm already sitting here like this weekend thinking, I can't juggle, all the different streams that I have, let alone in an organisation. But if people did want to get involved with those sort of pillars and initiatives you mentioned there, how could they do that?
So we have a website, and if they just type in the AMR narrative, we use that as a hashtag on all our channels. We also use that as our handle on all channels. So we're on YouTube, Instagram, LinkedIn, Facebook. I don't want to give you my TikTok because I'm not so great on TikTok.
That's right. Me neither. Me neither. I'm still learning that. I don't think I ever will. It changes too quickly.
But I mean, we're quite visible online with the AMR narrative. So again, if you just type in hashtag the AMR narrative or the @ symbol with the AMR narrative, our website is theamrnarrative.org. And on that website, we've also got a place where they can share their story. And usually we work with people to be able to do that. So, if they just want to put a message and say, I'd love to share my story, but I'm scared or whatever, then I could work with them to do that. And yeah, I mean, I'm on X. We're on X as well. We're quite active on X. So my personal handle is _FaceSA. And I'm on LinkedIn as well. So they're more than welcome to contact me on LinkedIn if they want to discuss anything as well.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you so much for that. And for anyone that's watching this, either as a video, I'll put it in the show description where you can find Vanessa's organisation and anything else that handles, social media handles, and the same for anyone listening to this back on the podcast. And also, because there's lots of ways we try to reach people where they are, we chop things up into shorts. That's pretty much most thing I do on TikTok. I just chop it up and put it on there, and what flies. But I think there's so many really important little sound bites you've said in this conversation that I will try and get out there to help you guys and signpost back to you, so people can either get involved or get the information they need. So thank you so much for giving up your Sunday evening. I feel like I probably should give you space, because that's flown by the way. I've been out of this game for 2 months, and sometimes when you come back you can think, how am I going to fill the hour? That's absolutely flown by. Is there anything else you wanted to talk about or cover or promote, any project you guys are working on or anything like that, just so you've got the opportunity to do so?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think we've covered a lot of things. I think one of the things that I would say is, if you're a patient that wants to get involved in AMR, get hold of me. And I mean, the WHO Taskforce of AMR survivors is quite a powerful group. You could also search for that, WHO Taskforce of AMR survivors. On there, we've also created a document that talks about how to engage and how to get involved. And we've actually listed 10 different things. So, from your national action plan, it sounds all technical, but don't worry, we've tried to keep it as simple as possible. But like the national action plan, getting involved in medical education, sharing our stories, and again, that task force was put together because our lived experiences, and this is what you do, Joel, so you recognize the importance of that. When we work together to share our lived experiences, we can change so much. We can change so many things. I think that's basically it. I think if they look on the website, they can find it anyway. And if they Google WHO Task Force of AMR survivors, it'll be a reiteration of exactly, in terms of AMR, what you have so amazingly done as a patient advocate. So I just want to say I'm so honoured to be on your show.
Pleasure.
You are amazing.
that will never stop making me blush when people say things like for me, it just felt like the obvious thing to do. I've only got one story. There's so many more out there. So if I've got the means to share other people's, then that felt like the most natural thing to do. So thank you so much for being a part of it, Vanessa, and thank you also for being like a little bit of a personal hero, if I don't embarrass you too much, because you really are setting the path for people like me, and allowing me to dream bigger in terms of the reach and the impact and what we can achieve. And it's been a pleasure watching the last couple of years, everything you're doing.
Yeah, well, you too. I'm a big fan too. So just so you know, and have a safe trip to Rwanda. Africa's amazing.
Yeah, no, I must admit, I could have done without the Mpox news right before I found out about that. But we'll cross that bridge in another couple of weeks. It's not until October. We'll see. We'll monitor that one, given my immune system. But yeah, thank you so much. It's an amazing opportunity, and I appreciate all the support. Vanessa, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you for giving up your Sunday evening. I really do appreciate it. I will be in touch about ways we can help each other as well after this. And just thank you so much. Really appreciate it. Enjoy the rest of your evening.
Anytime. You too. Enjoy your evening too, Jill.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.